Here we go, God willing. Okay, so we're in chapter number 13, verse number 12. We're in the midst of the drama. The truth is, this overall section is part of a bigger issue, and that is following the union of David and Bathsheba, which was very controversial. David was punished, as the prophet told him there's going to be a sword passing through his house, and the women of David's home will also be violated, just like he violated Bathsheba, and just like he took a sword, so to speak, he put her husband Uriah Hittite to death. So too will be done to him, and there will be issues with the women of David's house, and there will be issues with death. And now we're in the midst of that divine justice is bringing these things out in David's home. And what we learned last time was that you had half siblings, the children of David. Amnon, on the one hand, had fallen in love with Tamar, a girl named Tamar, on the other hand. Both of their fathers was David, but they were born to different mothers. And we discussed last time how Tamar, according to most opinions, was not technically related because she was the daughter of Ma'acha, who David married before she converted. It was through the process of Eshet Yefat Toar, the captive woman during the time of war. David was with her, and she conceived Tamar before she converted, and therefore Tamar is not technically related because a convert has no halachic relations to his biological siblings. Okay, so in any event, Amnon falls in love with his half-sister, sort of half-sister Tamar. And he conspires, he fakes sick, he stays in bed, and he insists that she comes bring him food. And then he grabs her and he tries to be with her. And that's what we're picking up in the midst of this drama. Vatomer lo in verse number 12. Alachi, please, my brother, don't. Al te'aneni, do not rape me. Ki lo yasechen be'Yisrael, if such a thing should not be done in Israel. Like what you're doing is disgraceful. The action itself is disgraceful, number one. Don't do this disgusting thing. And me, if not just like for the act itself, va'ani in verse number 13. As for me, ana olichet cherpati, where will I take my disgrace? And you should think about your own prestige. You're going to be like a lowly person. So she's giving him 3 reasons not to do this. It's a gross act. Have some sensitivity for my plight. You know, as somebody who's been violated by my own brother, it's going to be disgraceful for the rest of my life. And at least have concern for your own reputation. If the word gets out that you did this, you know, it's going to be bad for you. So she says to him, speak to the king, our father David. He won't hold me back from you, meaning let's not do it this way. Let's get married in a formal setting and we can make it right. So this line was what indicated to many of the Mefarshim that they were not technically related. She's saying, David will let us get married. Let's just approach our father, the king, and he'll find a way for us to get married, which indicates that they're not forbidden to one another. But while other Mefarshim who want to read the text according to its plain meaning say, even if they were related, she's just trying to find some excuse and just push him off and say, the king will find a way, just let's not do it this way. But in any event, in verse number 14, he does not accept her pleas. Velo ava lishmoa bekola, he did not desire to listen to her voice. Vayechazak mimena, and he overpowered her. Chazal say that she fought back, and she actually made him a krus shavcha, incapable of having children. But he overpowered her, vayaneha, and he violated her. Vaishkavota. The very next verse, number 15, this is so fascinating and illuminating. Vayisna'eha Amnon. Immediately after Amnon violated her, raped her, it says that he hated her. One verse ago, he was literally lovesick. He became physically ill because of his love and desire for Tamar. And the moment he satisfied it, vayisna'eha, he hated her. Sin'a gedola me'od, not just any hatred, a very big hatred. The hatred which he felt towards her was greater than the love which he loved her, the pasuk says. Vayomer la Amnon, and he said to her, Kumi lechi, get up and get out, he says to her. Extremely disgraceful. What happened? How could he have such a 180-degree shift in his feeling towards her? From this, Chazal and Avos bring a proof to the principle, Kol ahava hatzliya badavar. If love is dependent on an external factor, it's very dangerous, because the moment that factor is removed, the love is removed. And the ultimate type of love is a love which is not dependent on outside factors. It's not tluya badavar. It's not dependent on any particular thing. There's love because you love the person for who they are, not for something that they could provide for you, not for something that's fleeting, like looks or passion or a job that they have. So in this, and Chazal give an example. What is an example of love which is dependent on something? The love of Amnon to Tamar. That he just had a lustful desire for her. It was a completely based and physical, crude place where his love was coming from. So the moment that was satisfied, that love just disappeared. Poof. That was ahabat liaba davar. It was love that was dependent on a thing. And when the thing was removed, when he was able to satisfy that lust, boom, not only did he not love her anymore, he hated her. He created such a vacuum that it was filled with hatred more than what he had love for her. And interestingly enough, they give an opposite example of love which is not dependent on anything, like the love between David and Jonathan. Even though they should have been natural adversaries because they were competing for the throne, their love was one that was enduring because they loved each other for their essence and not for any external factor. Okay, so here Amnon hates Tamar and he commands her to leave. In verse number 16, she says to him, what you're doing now is greater than what you've already done. Like, first you violate me and now you're going to send me out in disgrace. Like imagine the condition she was in after she just had a physical fight to protect herself and she lost. It's even worse. And he did not hear her pleading, and he didn't even bother showing her out himself. By cried naro misharto, he calls his attendant and he says, take her out of here and lock the door behind her. The verse number 18 interjects and says, she was wearing a ketonet pasim, woolen tunic. Kichen tilbashna, or is it woolen or is it? Yeah, ketonet pasim. Kichen tilbashna benot hamelech habetulot meilim. For it was the way of the royal girls who were virgins to wear such cloaks. And while she was wearing this cloak, that's what she was wearing that day, because she was a royal girl. She was sent out. And in the next verse, she places ashes upon her head, and she rends this royal garb. She rends this garment, which is a sign of her nobility and her prestige. And the fact that she is a virgin, she now rips it. And she puts her hand on her head. And she goes continuously wailing throughout the streets, basically lamenting her own fate. It's very interesting. It's perhaps is worth taking an aside here to talk about this cloak for a moment. The expression ketonet pasim. Ketonet pasim, that is the exact phrase used for the cloak that Yaakov gave to Yosef. Yaakov loved his son Yosef in the Parshiot coming up next week. And so Yaakov bestows upon Joseph this cloak. So what does the word pasim mean? Pasim, it could mean the material it's made out of. A famous English translation, which is one of the approaches in Chazal, is a stripe. It means a pas is like a stripe, this striped cloak. But many of the Mefarshim say that pasim is from the language of pas. A pas yad is the palm of your hand, and royal people would wear cloaks that came up to the palm of their hands to indicate that they were exempt from doing manual labor, right? A peasant or somebody who's doing manual labor is not able to wear cloaks that go up to the palm of your hand, because you got to hold shovels, you got to hold tools, you got to get your hands dirty. But if you're royalty and leadership, then you can wear a cloak that comes up to the pas, to the pasim, right? To the palms of your hands, to indicate that you are on a higher level, not needing to do this work. So when Yaakov bestowed that cloak upon Yosef, what he meant was to indicate that Yosef should be a leader amongst his brethren. Prophetically, Yaakov saw that Yosef had some leadership quality or something to instill in the brothers that they needed to learn from Yosef, and he insisted on giving him this cloak. It was a mistake, apparently. Chazal criticized his playing favorites openly. But just in this overlap between the Ketzonet Pasim, they bring a proof from here that this is a cloak of royalty, and that Yaakov was indicating that Yosef should be put above his brothers and made a leader. Okay. I don't know if anyone's out there. I hope you are. Okay, I'm enjoying learning. I hope you are too. I don't see you.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. Check in. Now we're good for another 3,000 miles. Let's do it. All right. Now, if you remember, Amnon and Tamar were half brother and sister. They shared only David in common, their father. But Tamar had a brother, Avshalom, who was a full brother. Who was also born to Ma'acha. And she was very close with Avshalom. And Avshalom takes this violation extremely personally. So the first thing we see is Avshalom is going to console Tamar. He's going to console his sister and say, like, come on, just put it behind you. Don't worry about it. But he personally is going to be stewing over this, and he will get his revenge, as we're about to learn. So here comes verse number 20. Vayomer eleh Avshalom achiha ha'aminon achich hayaymach v'ata achuti acharishi achichu. You should be this Aminon. His name is Amnon, and he refers to him as Aminon. He adds a letter to his name. The Mitzudat Tzion explains it's like a disparaging way to refer to him. You add like a little a letter to indicate that he's a small person. That little guy, he's your brother. And so be silent because he's your brother. Don't put your heart on the matter. So Tamar sat Shomeima Beit Avshalom Achia. Tamar sat devastated in the house of Avshalom. Yeah, she was now this violated girl, probably going to have a hard time with Shidduchim, very embarrassed, very ashamed, and she took up residence in her brother's home, Avshalom. The word got back to David. He's busy running the country, and he hears what's happening in his house. And it was extremely distressful for him. Number one, why is it distressful? Obviously, the act itself is terrible. The infighting between the siblings and the fact that one raped the other, horrible. But also, one can imagine that the words of the prophet are ringing in his ears, that this is David's fault in a deeper way. And this came upon his children because of his actions towards Bathsheba. The next verse tells us that Avshalom did not speak to Amnon, not good things and not bad things. Which on the one hand shows how much he hated him. On the other hand, this is actually a praise of Avshalom, that he didn't fake it. He was not able to be two-faced, like American customer service. Hi, how you doing? How's your day going? Right? And in their hearts, they're thinking about all kinds of terrible thoughts. Avshalom was not able to speak one way on the outside and feel a different way on the inside. His heart and his mouth were equal. And therefore, since he hated Amnon, he did not speak to him, not good or bad. And that is actually a praise, like it says by the brothers and Yosef. Once again, another connection, that the brothers were not able to speak to Yosef because they hated him. They couldn't even fake it. It's a praise that a person should be honest and reflect outside what's happening inside. Okay, now, 2 years later, there's a gap in the text, and now a new verse starts, number 23. Vayhi lishnatayim. This is 2 years have passed. And it came time to shear the sheep of Avshalom, which was like an annual thing, in a place called Baal Chatzor, in the region of Ephraim. And Avshalom invites all of the sons of the king. So, yeah, he wants to make it an occasion. When you shear your sheep, it's like you're gathering in your wealth, and the custom is to make a party. And you invite your loved ones. Yeah, you get like a big paycheck, basically, and you're celebrating. It probably was also considered like a Sudat Hoda'ah, an expression of gratitude to Hashem. You make a big meal, and you feel very happy because of the wealth that's incoming, and you invite people to share in your joy. So he invites the entire royal family, all the sons of the king, that's, again, including Amnon, this brother which he hated, which had the incident 2 years prior. Avshalom, trying to give the appearance that his motive was completely pure, that this was a purely family gathering for the sake of Simcha, he even invites the king, his father David. Now, it's not typical for a king to attend these events. The king is off doing kingly things and he's very busy. But he insists that David should come, which is a pretext to get Amnon there. The son says to the father, David, they are shearing your servant's sheep. Will your king come with the servants? And the king says, no, I can't. Like, I'm busy. We can't all come. We don't want to burden you. Avshalom was insistent. He made repeated requests. And David said, I can't come. I don't want to come. But he gives him a bracha. So then Avshalom says to David, okay, if you can't come, Dad, will my brother Amnon come? Would you mind? Could you pressure my brother Amnon to come? Right? You see how he sets it up. He first opens as an invitation to David. Okay, if you can't come, which Avshalom is probably expecting, then ask my brother to come. Yeah, very crafty. At first, David was confused. Why should Amnon go with you? Thought you guys were upset at each other. Right? David probably was not so involved in their lives personally, but he certainly had a knowledge of the history, and it's only been 2 years. So he said, why is Amnon going? So Avshalom insists, just like he insisted that David should go, no, please, send my brother. I want people to be part of my simcha. So David sends Amnon and all of the sons of the king. He says, go ahead, go join your brother Avshalom at this sheep shearing party. Okay, verse number 28, Avshalom now tells his attendants, Re'una, ketov lev Amnon. Bayain, when you see my brother Amnon drunk, and I give you the word, kill him. He commands them to assassinate his brother Amnon. Right? This is what he had in mind the whole time. Don't fear. Because I'm the one commanding you. You should be strong. And you should be valiant. Amnon commands them to assassinate. Avshalom commands him to assassinate his brother Amnon. Again, because he's upset at him for violating his sister. And he strengthens the mercenaries. He says to them, I'm commanding you. It's not going to be on your head. Don't worry about the punishment because I'm the one commanding you. Now, obviously, that doesn't hold any water in a court, right? If a murderer says, that guy told me to do it, we say, sorry, buddy, you should use your own head and know when to listen and when not to listen. You listen to God. Don't listen to the person who commanded you to kill. But it could be what he was trying to say was, Anochi tziviti etchem, I'm commanding you to do this. This is the right thing to do. Maybe he was trying to convince them that legally Amnon deserved death. Basically, he was putting pressure on them. And he says, be strong and be valiant. Don't be afraid, right? He's encouraging them to do it. And sure enough, they do. Vayasu na'arei Avshalom le'Amnon kasher tziva Avshalom. They did to him what was commanded. So imagine the scene. They're sitting at this party, and there's wine going around. Everyone's happy, singing, a little bit drunk. And suddenly, I don't know how they did it. They take a knife to whatever, they kill Amnon. He drops dead. And the whole family's sitting there at the party. Everyone flees. They panic and they run away. What it might look like is we've invited all of the king's sons to a party. In a sense, we're all competition to one another because we all compete over the throne. After all, right, someone's going to succeed our father David, who's getting older slowly. So Amnon gets killed. Everybody panics. They don't necessarily think that this is a personal issue that he has with Amnon. They think that he invited them all here so he could kill them all so that he'll be the heir to the throne. That's their concern. And therefore, Vayakumu kol bnei hamelech, all of the children of the king get up, Vayakavu yishal pirdo vayanusu, and each one gets onto his mule and they flee, they run out of there. Vayihema baderech v'ashmua va'a, while they're running away, the news travels faster than people, and the news travels to David, Lemor, Hika Avshalom et kol bnei Amelech. Oh my God, Avshalom killed all of your sons. This is how the news arrives to David's lap. Imagine, all of your sons were killed. Rumors. Velo notar mehem echad, not one of them remained. This is what they tell David. There's a gap in the text. Vayakom, verse number 31, Vayakom HaMelech, Vayikrat begadav, Vayishkav arza. The king gets up, he tears his garments, and he lays on the ground, flat on the ground. And all of his servants are standing around with their own garments torn. Right? The king tears his garments, you follow in line. It's interesting that I always note to pay attention. The Masorah here, I can't see my camera. Let me see if our tradition is to put a gap in the text. Where is that? Right over here. This one verse, the king gets up, he rends his garments, and he lays flat on the ground. There's a space before that verse and a space after that. It would seem to be, if we're gathering evidence for what these spaces are meant to indicate, a tremendous emotion or a tremendous reaction, something that can't quite be contained in text. The scroll has to make space for this extremely intense experience. That's what seems to be happening here. Imagine David HaMelech, who was promised Mashiach, the one who would bring the world to its perfection and an eternal line of kings. He just hears that all of his sons were wiped out. And again, think of what's going on in his head. Not only is this incident a tragedy, but it's my fault. The prophet Natan told me after I did what I did with Bathsheba and I got her husband killed, that as a result of that, there'd be a sword passing through my home. So anytime David hears bad news, number one, it's bad news, but number two, it's my fault. And David, he's lying flat on the ground, as if like, that's it. He's done. But yeah, go ahead. The hand is raised, Mr. Fox or Mrs. Fox. Yeah.
Does all of this that's going on appear to be more vengeful than the original David and Bathsheba?
I would say so, right? As we learned, Bathsheba was not technically married, and it wasn't rape. But Uriah Hiti, her husband, was technically liable to the death penalty because he rebelled against the king, and he died in battle. It wasn't an assassination. So it does seem a lot more extreme in the receiving end on David's side than what he actually perpetrated. Do you mean to point that out? Like it's like unfair, the reaction?
It's unbalanced.
Right.
So anyway, that's why it's appearing in these words.
I think that it has something to do with David is operating at a much higher level. So everything that he does is an extremely high voltage, high impact activity. So in heaven, so to speak, when David makes a minor sin, that is worth like 1,000 points. Yeah, that's 1,000 volts. And so the punishment in the physical world will be manifest as something that looks extreme. It looks extreme. But the reason for that is because he is on such a lofty level that he affects so much spiritually that this is actually, it must be apparently, evidently, this is balanced relative to the crime that he had committed. Meaning so much is expected of a person on such a level that to us, what looks like an unbalanced reaction from God is actually perfect justice and maybe probably even merciful.
Certainly Tamar's involvement has got to be horrible on her for all the reasons that are articulated.
Correct. And the truth is, we can never be two-dimensional. Whenever justice is being administered, so it's one thing, for David to get a flat tire, that's like a super personal thing. He lost money. But when it's involving other human beings, like Tamar, and there's free will involved, like Amnon.
Yeah.
So what here we're dealing with the mysteries of divine providence, where somehow God is able to take the free will action of human beings and to incorporate that into the justice which involves other people. That is the unfathomable wisdom of God, to be able to weave all these threads together, that you have the personal plight of Tamar, that for some reason she's getting this punishment that has to be relevant to her and her personal justice. And it also applies to David at the same time. And at the same time, I'm known. And yeah, I like to think of it when I'm stuck in traffic. I think how many thousands of things are being affected by this one traffic jam, right? Everyone's sitting in this traffic, and they're going to meet different people because of this. They're going to miss certain appointments. So many different threads are involved in one.
I follow aircraft accidents on the Smithsonian Channel,
Uh-huh.
and the lessons learned in a particular accident where people die, hundreds of people die, how it has a ripple effect on the lives of thousands of others down the road.
Yeah, I mean,
Very, very strong effect.
yeah, as
Um,
as it's spine tingling in terms of the implications of Hashem's
yes.
controlling the entire world simultaneously, and it all fits together. That's Hashem's justice. Okay, so here, what actually happened was, let's dive back into the text. We'll try to get to the end of the chapter. Only one son was killed. Avshalom just killed Amnon because he was upset at him for what he had done to his sister. But the news gets back to David that all of the sons were killed. So here comes a voice we've heard before. His name is Yonadav. Yonadav is the nephew of David, and he was the friend of Amnon. You remember, he was the one who gave Amnon the advice to play sick and invite Tamar to cook him some food. And Yonadav says in verse number 32, Al Yamar Daniyat Kol Narim B'nei Amalek Emitu. No, they didn't kill everybody. They just kill Amnon because Avshalom is upset at Amnon for what he did for violating Tamar. I mean, who knows better than Yonadav, the one who actually gave the advice to get Tamar raped? Who knows better than him with the actual motive of Avshalom? He's well aware of what's going on. He says, "Don't worry, they're not all dead. It's just that one brother that was killed because he had an issue with him." Only Amnon himself died. Okay. In the meantime, the text tells us 34, Vaivrach Avshalom. Avshalom runs away, right? The one who just assassinated his brother or had his servants do it, he runs away because he doesn't want to get in trouble. Okay, this is actually just an aside. This one line, Vaivrach Avshalom, those first two words of the verse that Avshalom fled, that's like the camera is on Avshalom and he's running away. And in the meantime, now we're going to have that all of the king's sons return to David. And he discovers that they're in fact alive. The watchman lifts up his eyes and he sees and he sees men coming from behind the mountain. They were coming from the opposite direction he expected because the party was over there and they're coming from over there. The idea is that they were running away, so they had to run in a circuitous route, and they're coming from behind. And Yonadav, the advisor, says, "Oh, hine b'nei Amelech ba'u. Look, they're the king's sons. Kidvar avdecha kenaya. Like your servant spoke. I told you they were alive." So here's this guy. He's the only one who's not distressed in the room. David Amelech, his garments are rent. He just found out that he thought all of his sons died. He found out that one of his sons was killed by his other son. Or he's obviously distressed. And in the meantime, Yonadav is like patting himself on the back. Look, it's like I told you, they're alive. It's like I said, taking a lot of credit for himself rather than being shameful for having been involved in this whole thing. Okay. And indeed, when he finished speaking in verse number 36, the king's sons came and they all cried because they just witnessed the murder of their brother. And the king and all of his servants cried a great cry. Now the verse goes back to Avshalom. Avshalom is the one on the run. Where does he go? He goes to the king of Geshur, which is actually his, would it be his grandfather? He goes to Talmai ben Amihud Melech Geshur, Vaitabel al benu kolemim. Let me just double check. Yeah, it's his grandfather, maternal. Remember, he came from Ma'acha, who was a convert. So he goes to this non-Jewish person, Talmai Melech Geshur, and in the meantime, it says, Vaitabel al beno kolemim. Then he mourned for his son all the days. The verse is switching subjects to David. It's interesting. It combines the two. David mourned for Amnon all of his days, which means he mourned for him consistently for a period of 3 years, as we're about to see. And Avshalom, in the meantime, was with his grandfather. The Avshalom Barak Ve'elef Geshur, he goes to Geshur, and he was there for 3 years. And then the chapter concludes, Vatechal David el Hamelech. Vatechal David Hamelech. David Hamelech yearned. His soul yearned for his son Avshalom. After 3 years of mourning for Amnon, he now missed his son Avshalom. Because now he was finally consoled after his son Amnon, and he wants to see his son Avshalom again. Okay, so that's the story. I'm just going to make one closing comment. But so the story again was Avshalom assassinates Amnon after 2 years of him violating Tamar, and Avshalom runs away to his grandfather. David HaMelech gets the news. He mourns for 3 years, and then he's consoled, and now he's yearning for his son Avshalom. Yes, Mr. Fox.
Was the weeping for the death, or was the weeping for the news that the sons were alive?
That's interesting. I assumed it was for the death. It says that the children themselves were crying. Did you notice that? It says the children came in verse number 35. In the verse number 36, and they all cried. Sometimes it's like overwhelming emotion after you've been saved from a near death. Interesting question. I wonder if any Mefarshim take it the other way, that they're crying about their survival. One thing that people point out is the Barbanel contrasts David's reaction to Amnon's death. He contrasts it to the reaction. Remember that Bathsheba bore a child from that first union, and David was fasting and crying for 7 days, and then the child died when he was 7 days old, and then David got up, and that's it. It was over. He was consoled and it was done. So what's the idea? How come for the baby, David, as soon as the child died, he said, okay, what can I do? I tried and he wasn't saved. Back to business. And here his son Amnon is killed and he mourns for 3 years. He mourns. What do you think the difference is?
That's a big part of life.
What'd you say, Mr. Wilbur? I think I heard you said. Can you repeat that?
A big part of life is mourning. And I've had people in my family, they mourn, and they never stop mourning.
Yeah, absolutely. The Abarbanel says that Amnon had lived for many years. He was already a grown man. I don't know how old he was, but he had lived for many years. This is a life filled with experiences, and that is a tremendous loss. As tragic as the loss of the baby was, it doesn't compare to the loss of somebody who you've raised and you've seen and he's grown and he's become a person. That's
a rapist.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And a rapist. He's got a big black dot on his resume. But nevertheless, it is interesting. Yeah, David mourns for him despite this very, very bad thing that he did. And furthermore, it could be that part of the tragedy was just like the whole thing that came about. He was mourning his actions, as well as the fact that now his son assassinated him. Like it's a much bigger thing, a scenario that emerged more than just like an isolated death, which in itself is certainly tragic. Okay, this brings us to the end of chapter 13. God willing, we'll pick up next time with 14, with David trying to reunite with Avshalom. And next week, God willing, we'll be on. the following week is Hanukkah. We'll discuss our schedule for Hanukkah. Maybe we might have to move around sometimes. Okay.
Okay,
What'd you
okay.
say?
I have a message for Moshe Katz. I'm not going to do it.